We have a 1976 Toyota Chinook and a dream to make it a four-wheel drive overland weapon. After months of debate, we purchased an 80 series Land Cruiser chassis with e-lockers for a steal and got to work tearing it down. We sandblasted the frame and did our best to get off all the surface rust from a near 30-year-old truck that lived by the ocean. The Chinook we have is factory original with 90,000 miles on it, basically a rolling time capsule. We knew the little 20R four-cylinder wouldn't be enough for our use case, so we pulled the engine and gutted the engine bay. After many hours spent with a tape measure, we figured out a plan and got to work unbolting the frame and body from the Chinook. We knew the wheelbases were near identical, and this was a huge motivator for this build initially. Using old swivel jacks, we welded custom mounts to use the door hinge bolts to lift the body off the Chinook. This was the scariest part, and one that I was the most worried about. It took a few hours of careful lifting to get the body and frame separated. And the next day, we rolled the 80 series chassis underneath and began with a tape measure again to see how things were going to line up.
Yeah, we're good.
There was going to be a few hurdles, but it was all looking good at this point. Half a day with a tape measure, we had the Chinook lined up with its new frame. Now it was time to make some custom mounts. The first step of metal fabrication is cardboard fabrication. I went through the process methodically, taking precise measurements over and over to get it right the first time. This was unknown territory for me. Being new to fabrication, and no one has ever done this swap before, we had to figure it out ourselves. With a few tutorials on Fusion 360, I had my designs drawn out and cut on the plasma table. I welded them together and spent more hours aligning them on the chassis before making what would be the most important welds of my life. This stage took us 4 days. It was a huge win, as this was the stage I was most concerned about. We used 3/16 plate to make the cab and camper mounts, and 2x2 square tube to help support the rear structure of the camper.
That's it. It's officially on its own weight.
All of a sudden, we had a rolling chassis. Things were taking shape in a big way, but the biggest hurdles were yet to come, as you don't know what you don't know. Choosing an engine for a rig like this is tricky, especially when you're on a budget. I did the calculations on a diesel swap, but we would have to drive over 100,000 kilometers for the savings in fuel to catch up on the initial build cost. We ended up deciding on the venerable Toyota 5VZ engine. Many love it, some don't. It posed huge advantages for us. Mainly, its known reliability, decent power, and global access to parts and service. We were planning to drive this to South America, where these old Toyotas are very well known. After mocking the engine up more than once in the engine bay, it took me a tedious few days to get the engine mounts made up and positioned perfectly for its new heart. We made a lot of small errors, but this was our very first build, and we learned something every single day.
Making custom fuel lines because custom everything.
Progress became sporadic. We would get halfway into one thing and realize we need to order a specific part or go to the store. That rhythm went on for over a week. The hurdles persisted continually, but so did we. We went with a 3-row copper core radiator from a V6 truck, and with a little modifications, it would work on the factory bolt holes. Wiring the engine was the other task I was most apprehensive about. Having never done an engine swap myself, my confidence was low. Thankfully, we have friends who know more than me. After getting a list of the 5 wires we need to put on relays, some to switch to ignition power, a couple to constant power, and the starter wire, it all came together in one day.
Okay, now that the ECU is plugged in,
We're gonna try again. Ready, Jeff? Crank. Crank.
had some soldering and cleaning up to do, but it was alive. Another huge win for Toyota World Runners. But it was still running off a jerry can of fuel, so we had a long way to go still.
Just a quick reminder to hit that like button and please subscribe if you're not already. We're really close to 100,000 subscribers, and it's all thanks to you guys. We appreciate you being here. Please hit the like button, subscribe if you're not already. Let's get back to the build.
Next up was muscling the transmission and transfer case combo up into the transmission tunnel. It became obvious very quickly that we were going to have to do some modifications to the floor of the Chinook. We were also going to need a custom crossmember to support the transmission, so it was back to the drawing board, literally. One of the issues that I spent a ton of time thinking and deliberating about was a fuel tank. Neither of the factory tanks from the Chinook or the Land Cruiser would work. So I needed something custom, didn't have the budget to make something out of stainless. Well, one day when we were at an auto wrecker, I came across a 1992 Suburban auxiliary tank. This might just be the answer to our problems. But like I said, everything was happening all at once. So we were currently rebuilding both front and rear axles with brand new parts.
Stuff. More stuff.
Since our 80 series is the later model from 1996, it has the bigger brakes, discs front and rear, and we upgraded them with a Power Stop brakes kit. It was the biggest and honestly most expensive kit that we could find at the time for the 80 series, but that's okay. This is exactly where I want to put money into stopping a heavy truck when it's on the highway. All brand new Japanese bearings and a fresh paint job. Pretty much all of our systems had to be custom. Custom brake lines, fuel lines, coolant hoses from a different vehicle, but I made sure to use factory parts everywhere possible. I relocated the factory fuel filter to the engine bay, and the fuel tank we got looks like it's going to work. We expected to be in the mid-teens as far as MPG, so we knew we wanted to have a long range, and that was going to be the job of a huge fuel tank. This Suburban fuel tank is 160 liters, and by some stroke of miracles, fit perfectly. I was also able to use the factory Chevrolet fuel tank straps with some custom brackets. I made progress on the transmission tunnel, made a new battery tray, and lightly modified a factory oil pan to make it work with our truck. We're making progress, but we're still a long way to go. We rolled the Chinook to the other side of the shop to start working on some armor. Jason knocked out this incredibly good-looking bumper in one day. To say this was a huge motivator is an understatement. I finished up the transmission tunnel. We insulated and covered the floor and made some very tricky seat brackets for our 3rd Gen 4Runner bucket seats. The original steering rods on the Land Cruiser were so seized we could barely get the old tie rods out. So once again, it was more custom parts. We got all brand new tie rod ends and some trail gear weld-in bungs, some 1/4-inch wall DOM tubing to make our own tie rod and drag link. Another side quest amidst all the chaos was rebuilding and re-insulating the original door on the back of the camper. We haven't even touched the interior yet, and we're supposed to be able to live out of this thing and leave in 2 weeks. Suspension was another tricky one, considering we had no real basis to go off. It was guesswork trying to figure out what final weights would be over each axle. With our timeline quickly shrinking, we didn't have the option to build everything, then order the right springs and shocks. So I had to make the best guess possible. I added up all our weights and ordered 6-inch heavy-duty lift springs for the rear and 2-inch lift springs for the front. We rolled the dice and we got doubles. The springs gave us the right amount of lift and it looked like the truck would sit level front to back when fully loaded. Another win. Because of the way our suspension is designed on an 80 series, it meant that lifting the vehicle would require custom panhard bars front and rear. Not wanting to spend a couple grand on Dobinson's ones, we opted to make our own. Another trip to the metal store, and we had some solid stock to cut and sleeve and lengthen both front and rear panhard bars. I also had to lengthen the rear sway bar end links. We got some help with the exhaust and a custom harness for our LED headlights. With the new lift installed, we had to make some caster adjustments. I decided to go with the Dobinson's caster correction bushings. I like this option because one purchase got us 3 different caster options. What I don't like about these bushings is that they limit flex compared to factory bushings or caster plates. But again, these were choices made with time and budget constraints. We went with time-tested and budget-friendly Bilstein shocks, and we got our drive shafts back from the machine shop. The day finally came for our first test drive. Although not complete, it was enough to get a feel for how it was going to drive, and if you've ever built something before, you know how good this day can be. We painted the bumpers and installed a brand new Warn 10S. We upgraded our alternator from 60 to 150 amps for charging the house battery. I used rivet nuts to make a custom mount for a new navigation unit, and we got the engine bay looking fresh with a custom fan shroud. The big elephant in the room at this point is the fact we are planning to live out of this rig for up to 18 months and have no interior. Back in the summer, we made the hard decision to partially gut the interior to remove the old shag carpet and the antiquated water and power systems. Everything worked, but we feared it would not to stand up to 2 years driving to Patagonia. It was all hands on deck at this point. Stacy was insulating the camper, my mom laid the new flooring, and I spent days figuring out our water and power systems. We went with a 100 amp hour lithium battery to run our new 60-liter fridge, lights, and to charge camera batteries. It was around this time we said yes to a stranger who became a great friend. Scott designed and framed our new countertop just 10 days before we were set to leave. It was ridiculous how many hours we put in such few days. The effort was constant, and our persistence was unmatched. I designed a robust 3-stage water system using a marine water pump, 3 filters, and a 60-liter tank we mounted under the truck. The rush to complete the interior continued like a bullet train. We installed a diesel heater and did some exciting aesthetic upgrades to the exterior of the Chinook. We were stoked on how the new color looked. We persisted through a massive snowstorm as Scott finished the counterframe and Jason made us an outdoor fold-down stove. I finally got the countertop mounted and dropped in a new stove and brand new stainless steel sink. After that, it was a literal race to get the final details accomplished so we could beat the next snowfall. We got new decals installed, and just like that, we left. 1,500 adventurous miles later, we arrived in Denver, Colorado to get new 488 nitro gears and RCV axles installed. The Chinook is looking wicked, but we need a few more things before we can tackle all of Central and South America. Our new friend Ryan helped us finish our new awning install, new storage solutions, new e-locker actuator, new brake booster, and a panhard correction kit. After that, the Chinook drove as good as it looked, but there's one piece left. We badly needed new tires, and Falcon Tire came through with their brand new RT, and we wrapped them around a set of KMC wheels. Feeling ready for anything, We hit the dirt and drove to Mexico, across Central America, and all the way to the tip of South America. Perhaps miraculously, we did it all without any major failures. A few new fuel pumps, but nothing catastrophic. We've got the Chinook back in Canada now, and are about to take everything we learned from living in it for a year and a half and apply it to version 2.0, which will be competing for the ultimate go-anywhere 4x4 adventure house. The world's first Land Cruiser Chinook build continues. If you want to watch the complete build series or our entire trip to South America and back, check out the playlist on our YouTube page. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe if you're not already, and we'll see you next time.